When did your something is very wrong here feeling turned out to be true? I used to work in a big city as a medical emergency responder dispatcher. One night I arrived to my shift, and like 1 hour later I get this call. A man calling for his wife who was choking on food, and who suddenly started to feel better whilst the call, which made him change his mind and say he didn't need an ambulance anymore. I could have stopped the call there, cancel or rank it as a low priority, but I had this feeling. And when the man asked me if I wanted to speak to her I said yes. Ma'am, this is the emergency services. Are you sure that you don't need help of any kind? Double quote. No answer. Would need the services of the police? Maybe. So I ask, is the guy beside you dangerous? Yes. Man, the rush of adrenaline I got. I made her go to safety and then she told me all about how he had been beating her for a long time. How she had no way to get out of this. That she was choking while eating because of the stress of being beside him. I worked with the police and they went on the scene, probably preventing the woman from being beaten up again. Always trust your instinct. I love you for having that feeling and following your gut. You literally saved her by giving her an opportunity to say something. Women in her position are often so heavily controlled and monitored it's rare that a safe moment presents itself. I'm a member of a local Facebook group to help moms find babysitters. One of the admins was a mid-20s man who babysat for tons of kids in the area and specialized in caring for nonverbal and autistic children. His posts always gave me, and some other members, a weird vibe, but he was loved by this group as a whole. He was just arrested for molesting 2 children and possession of child p. Bail is set at $2 million. It's estimated that he sat for over 500 children in our area. Who knows how many he abused. Specialized in caring for nonverbal and autistic children. Ugh. That clause says so much. About 6 years ago, my sister and her family were visiting. Her daughter, 4 months old at the time, was napping in the house while the adults were hanging outside. I went into the house to grab something and glanced over at my niece. She was limp and strange looking, like spaced out. It really freaked me out, so I picked her up, panicking a bit, and handed her to my bill. By this time she was back to normal, so we shrugged it off. I said something like, oh, I forgot how babies look when they sleep. Within 1-2 days, my niece started having 10 seizures a day. What I had witnessed was a seizure. That was the beginning of a multi-year nightmare of seizures, hospital visits, neurological testing, and many different types of anti-seizure meds. She was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. Thankfully, the docs found meds that worked. Her seizures went away, and she was eventually weaned off her medication. She has been seizure-free for 4 years. Now she is a healthy, beautiful and happy little lady. Came back to work after a week off for Christmas vacation and immediately noticed something was off with my friend. I had no clue what it was, but I just knew something was wrong with him, but I couldn't explain what it was. I kept asking him if he was alright, but he kept saying everything was fine. On the second day he came up to me and asked me how to do something that I know he knew how to do. I had trained him on how to do it. I became very concerned at this point. The third day was New Year's Eve, so we only had a half day and he was working on a spreadsheet. End of the day came around and I took one look at it and I could have printed it out and called it modern art. That's how horrifying it looked. I called the boss over and he pulled him off of it, which caused my friend to break down and start crying because he couldn't understand that he had done anything wrong. I was moving to a new place over our day and a half off, so I simply told him that something was wrong with him and he needed to get some help. We came back in for one day on Friday and my friend wasn't there. I learned that he was in the hospital because of a heart attack. Later on we learned that during the days leading up he was suffering from mini strokes, and that all of my constant nagging about if he was alright ultimately led to him thinking that maybe there is something wrong with him, and so he called a taxi to take him to the OR on New Year's Eve, where they immediately recognized that he was having a heart attack. A doctor later told him that if he had not gone to the OR when he did, he would not have woken up if he had gone to sleep that night. Because of this, my friend says that I saved his life through the power of our friendship. When I was 19, I was walking home at midnight from a tram stop and I got the feeling I should pretend I was on the phone. A minute after doing so, a car pulls up next to me on the empty road. It's 4 guys all leering at me. The one in the passenger side starts saying things like, "How about we take you for a good time," and his tone is predatory. I try to keep it cool because I didn't want to look frightened to encourage them that I am prey, and start telling my friend there's a group of guys in a car harassing me and describing the car. I hear the driver say to his mate something about my conversation on the phone, and then they take off. I ran home faster than Usain Bolt with 000 now ready on my phone should they change their mind and come back. A couple of months later I hear on the news that in my area there was a group picking up girls and gang raping them. The description matched the car and the guys in it that followed me that night. I had the sense after my encounter to tell my work what happened and refused to do night shift anymore unless they paid for my taxi home. I shudder to think what may have happened if I hadn't pretended to be on the phone that night. About 15 years ago I left work early, like really early, for no real reason. I got home and all these kids were standing near my door, apartment complex next to a pond, and they were all staring at me and not saying anything. I went inside and dropped my bag and it wouldn't stop weighing on me how weird it was, so I went back outside. I spoke to them asking what was going on, and one kid meekly asked if I could help his friend. A kid I didn't see was sitting on a curb surrounded by all the rest. They had all jumped the fence next to the pond, except he slipped and impaled the flesh of his inner thigh and got stuck. The kids helped pick him up off of it, but he was just sitting there bleeding everywhere with a bunch of meat hanging out. I got him treated and ambulance on the way. He came back a few weeks later with his family to thank me, said I saved his leg. I was like 6 years old and in the backyard of my best friend neighbor swimming in a 3-foot play pool thing. She went inside to ask for something, and right as she left, a guy on a motorcycle drove down the alley and stopped. The fence was a small chain link fence, so he definitely saw me and stopped. And I could see him clearly, like 20 years later it's still so vivid. He pulled out some gloves and put them on, which is the last thing I saw him doing as I got out and ran through their garage out the front, and inside my house next door terrified. He drove around the front down the street slowly and about 10 minutes later shot 2 kids at the park at the end of my street. When I was 15, I hung out with some friends after school and got a ride home that night. No one had been home all day, so there were no lights on inside or out. The friend that drove me home didn't stick around to see if I made it in, so as I'm starting to make my way up the walkway to the front door, I sent someone waiting to meet me there. I calmly stop after taking a couple steps and say nope loud enough for the potential criminal to hear me, then briskly turn around and walk swiftly down the street, cut through a neighbor's backyard to get to the next street over, make my way to the nearest payphone, dial the police and tell them I think there's someone trying to rob the house. I get back when a police officer arrives and he shines his flashlight around the door and sees footprints in the snow leading from around the house. He follows those and sees they are around the entire house. There was in fact someone waiting for me to open the door that night. I laugh at the thought of their surprise to have some teenage girl acknowledge them from a distance and tell them not today. Dang it, drivers, always wait until the person you drop off is through the front door. My siblings and I were swimming at a neighbor's house with their kid, but the adults were inside. Randomly a thought came into my head of where's my sister at? She easily could have gone inside or have walked across the street and be home, but I felt like I needed to find her ASAP. I got all of us kids to search when we noticed she was at the bottom of the pool, completely blue. She made a complete recovery and is one of the best parts of my life. Just because not everyone is aware, you aren't likely to hear someone drowning. Every story I've ever heard about kids drowning is the same. People don't think anything is wrong because they can't hear anything. It's a huge red flag if kids aren't making any sounds. My father started publicly dating a woman shortly after my mother died. I later learned she's likely the woman he'd been having an affair with before she died. I liked her. One evening my father took me to one side and asked how I'd feel about him asking her to marry him. I got an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach and felt nauseated. I told my father I didn't want him to, and he asked why, as he thought I liked her. I explained that I did like her but had a bad feeling, and he said that's just a feeling. They don't mean anything. He already had the ring and proposed straight away. I got really excited about the engagement, the wedding, moving house, and my impending little sister. After the wedding she changed. After my half sister was born she went batshit. She abused me, my full sister, my mother's child, and later my half-sister, her own child. He only left her when my doctor told him something was clearly going on with her that was affecting my health. She was putting a substance that I'm intolerant to in my food, and my father wouldn't believe me and would force me to eat whatever she made. However, I couldn't get a doctor alone without her to tell them, and my maternal grandmother told him if he didn't leave her she'd go for custody. He accused me of lying for the entire time leading up to that and has never asked me about any of my attempts to get help since. You have been visited by the money cat. Subscribe to Updoot Reddit and get rich in 3.8 days. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can leave a like or comment and YouTube will show this video to more people. I post new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.